Hello there, and welcome to another installment of Chuck's Captivating Chat, the October 14th, 2024 edition. Today is my big sister Dinah's birthday, so I'm sending a lot of love out to her. Um, I'm her little baby brother, and I mean baby brother. My parents only had two children, and they managed to space us 14 years apart. But, the thing is, my sister and I have such what I believe is a soul connection. I believe we've had many lifetimes together. And, she's just been, I know she does not like to be referred to as a second mother. She makes it very clear I am not your mother, I'm your sister. But when I was born, she was already a teenager. And in many ways, she was a second mother for me. And not to impugn my actual mother, but Dinah really, in many ways, was more nurturing to me. Also, Dinah always had a gift for talking with children, where she didn't talk down to children. She would talk to you as an equal. And she always took every question I had, no matter how inane or asinine as a 3 or 4 year old will ask. She never treated anything less than serious. Like I go, Dinah, why is the sky blue? What makes the wind blow? Questions like that. And she'd always give me a serious answer. Like she'd give me a scientific explanation in a way that a young child could understand it. And when I see her now with her own kids and now her grandchildren, I realized I was the dress rehearsal. Her children and grandchildren have me to thank because she got to practice on me first. So anyway, hey Ward, thank you. Oh, I should point out, you're spelling Dinah correctly with the H on the end, but my parents, longest time we thought they just didn't know how to spell Dinah right because they spell her name is spelled Dina, and of course everybody would say Dina. And poor Dinah has had to go through her whole life going, no, I am Dinah, not Dina. And I even thought mom and dad just didn't know how to spell it right. They didn't know you put an H on the end. But then I started looking at this wonderful old comic strip I'm sure you've heard of called Gasoline Alley, which has been around for 103 years. And the amazing thing about it is that it's always been in real time. Like the main character of Skizik's wallet, we first saw him as a newborn baby left on a doorstep in 1921. And we've watched him over the years, grow up, become a teenager, graduate high school, go out into the world, get married, become a father. Well, during the 40s, he was in World War II. We've watched his whole life. I believe he's now 103 years old, and the strip is still running. But anyway, his wife was named Nina. And I know that because there was a radio show in the 40s, Gasoline Alley, and they pronounced her name Nina. And if you see the strip, her name is spelled Nina. And my parents had my sister in the 1940s. Yeah, I was a late life baby. I think that's where they got it from. Nina in Gasoline Alley, because I think my father once even said, well, we saw the name in a magazine or something. I think he couldn't remember. That's what it was. It was Gasoline Alley. So anyway, happy birthday to my sister. I mean to belabor that, but hey, everybody, Wendy's here and Ward and Ward. So you went through the microfilm archives to follow it down the decades. Well, if you're on Facebook, there's a site that you would love. I think it's called Alley Cats of Gasoline Alley. I should try to look it up here because they've got almost all of the strips on there, going, and many times every day they will run a strip from say 1942, 1948, something from the 60s, 70s, like that. And it's just fascinating to watch all the stories. Here, I can look it up for you real quick here. I usually don't do this, but yes, it's called Gasoline Alley Cats. Gasoline Alley Cats. I think you would love it if you have followed it on microfilm. And I don't have it handy here, but I own an original strip from the actual artwork from a strip from 1939. That is one of my proudest possessions. I love having that. Um, yeah. Oh, yeah. Ward is right. It's quite it's a continuing time capsule, because even though it's a comic strip, these characters were treated with great reverence by the cartoonists. They were treated as real, and they incorporated real life experiences, real life innovations of the time. Like, for example, World War II was a very big part of the strip. Skeezik's going off to war. Um, they're showing the strips right now where Nina is just finding out that she's pregnant with her first child, and Skeezix is away at war, and so forth. But yeah, check it out. Let's see. Today, I said it was my sister's birthday. Well, tomorrow is, yes, Skeezix was the first comic strip character in your list. That's quite likely true. Uh, you know, uh, Even though the characters have aged through the years, I notice now they don't make mention in the current incarnation of the strip of the actual age of the people. I think it's because if they did that, they'd have characters breaking the Guinness Book of World Records for longevity. I think, like the character of Uncle Walt, it was estimated he'd be like 137 years old now. They only killed off one character to old age, and it was the character of Phyllis, Walt's wife. And her character had reached the age of 105. And I think the cartoonist, whoever was doing it at the time, figured, well, this is going to be the way most of the characters are going to go once they just reach ages that are humanly impossible. So the alternative is just not to mention the ages anymore. But I always loved that about it. But anyway, you see a little bit of artwork behind me here. It's Miss Lucy. And I thought I'd bring this out today. This is based on a glamour photo of Lucy in 1937 or 38 at RKO Studios. And yes, I am aware she was not a redhead yet. But I've always thought Lucy without her red hair is like Charlie Chaplin without his hat and cane. And Lucy in her autobiography did say, because she was technically a blonde at this time, but she insisted, well, I've always been sort of a redhead, even then, because she said her hair was more like a strawberry blonde. So I took liberties. But yeah, what a hat. Look at that feather. But I thought I'd bring this up because, well, first of all, my dear friend Pam of Pomona Remembers said to me, you need to start putting your artwork behind you while you're here doing your show. Remind people of what you do, publicize your art. And I said, well, okay, I agree with you. You're right. I need to start calling attention to it more. My nature is to be a little modest about this, but hey, it's what I do. And part of my living is through my artwork. So anyway, that's part of the reason. But the other reason is tomorrow is the 73rd anniversary of the premiere of a little tiny black and white situation comedy. You might have heard of it, called I Love Lucy. How's this for working in my Lucy story today? Ward, I'll answer that in a minute about how the Kamala Harris portrait is going. There's a story there. It's not that great of a story, but I'll tell it. And hi, Diane. Howdy. Oh, I'm in Kansas today. Oh, it's beautifully cool there. Well, it's cooled off here too, thank goodness. I mean, not cold by any means, but we've had such wretched heat waves here in Los Angeles. So at least today it's tolerable, it's bearable, and I can't wait for fall weather. I was just saying to a friend the other day, when I was a kid, I used to love summertime. Loved it. Now as a grown-up, summer's not so much fun anymore. It's hot, it's wretched, it's miserable. I run up a fortune in air conditioning bills. I can't wait for fall weather. And because it's so mild here in California, I even love wintertime. But truthfully, I even love winter on the East Coast. Like the last time I was in Boston about a decade ago, and it was 17 degrees. And I think with the wind, I don't even want to think what the wind chill factor was, probably 40 below zero or something, but I was in heaven. I just love to go walking in cold weather. I love it in New York, cold weather. Let's see, it's getting cool in your neck of the woods too, Ward. Oh, thankfully you were spared Helene and Milton. Yeah. And of course, I talked about my hometown in Virginia. My little tiny town got hit very hard, got a serious flooding from Helene. Thankfully escaped Milton. Of course, that was very tragic. As you saw, it went pretty much across the Florida panhandle and then out to sea, where Helene directed itself and went up the whole southern East Coast, from what I recall. And the bizarre thing about that hurricane is it gained strength on land. That's not what hurricanes are supposed to do. So it was very mysterious. But anyway, tomorrow is the 73rd anniversary of a show I hold very near and dear to my heart. I Love Lucy, which in 2012, there was a Gallup, it was a joint Gallup poll and ABC News together. And then, of course, they did a television special based on it, hosted by the late, great Barbara Walters, of the 100 greatest television shows of all time. And they didn't just do a poll, they also consulted with entertainment historians, authors. It was very conclusive, and it went down the line to finally the top 10, the top 5 shows like Seinfeld, MASH, All in the Family, Hill Street Blues, Star Trek. Well, you know what made number 1? I Love Lucy, the number 1 show of all time, officially declared. And then it was was it last year or the year before? I have to recall this. Variety magazine did their own countdown of the 100 greatest shows of all time. And it was a very seriously written article, explaining the choices and the reasoning. I don't have to tell you what made number 1 again. Greatest show of all time, I Love Lucy. And I wholeheartedly agree. For one thing, I can't think of a show that goes through all of the demographics the way that it does. I mean, can you think of any show that appeals to toddlers, little children, appeals to teenagers, appeals to young adults, middle-aged people, senior citizens, and it seems to appeal to all walks of life? Like, highly educated people love the show. Albert Einstein was a fan of the show. Maria Callas was such a fan of I Love Lucy when she was in New York in the 60s, late 60s, doing her famous master classes, hence the play Masterclass. She insisted on cutting the classes short at 3:30 in the afternoon so she could rush home to watch I Love Lucy. Queen Elizabeth II, sorry to say the first. There was no television in Queen Elizabeth's first time. Queen Elizabeth II was an I Love Lucy fan. Jacqueline Kennedy Onassis was a fan of I Love Lucy. It's just such a universal show. And there's just I was thinking today, there's such a purity to it. I believe that shows, movies have their own soul. Sometimes it can be something really dark and disturbing, and then sometimes it's something like Wizard of Oz or I Love Lucy, where it's like the highest vibrational soul you can imagine, where there's just such love and purity. In the case of both, just joy. I have over the years spoken to many I Love Lucy aficionados. When I was working on the book with Bart Andrews, we interviewed a lot of people. When I used to go to the Lucy conventions held in Burbank in the late 90s, this was when a lot of the I Love Lucy people were still alive, and you could actually meet them and talk to them and of course converge with all the fans. And it was just the same stories. I Love Lucy's like therapy to me. I can be so sad. I can be so despondent. And I watch that show and I feel good again. I feel happy. I can think of I remember one year I had a really bad New Year's Eve experience. I don't need to go into it. It's personal. It wasn't good. And let's just put it this way. I was home by myself licking my wounds. I was very sad and lonely. And flipping through the TV channels, there was an I Love Lucy marathon. And at midnight, they showed the Vitamina Vegemite episode. But when that was on, I thought, I'm going to be fine. I'm going to get through this night just fine. I have a close friend. She was going through breast cancer recovery and brutal chemotherapy and radiation. And she said, I Love Lucy is what got her through it. In the deepest of despair, she'd had that TV on and she'd just watch episodes over and over again. And I am of the firm belief that laughter is like, it's light, it's love. It's one of the highest vibrational things that exists in the whole universe. And I've said this, people say, well, what's the big deal? It's just a TV show. Or people say, well, Lucy's just a actor, a performer. She's just another human being, and say that. Well, my response is that, just like there are souls who come here, like someone came here to discover the vaccine for polio, or someone who instigates world peace, or whatever. Lucy's soul came here to make billions of people laugh, forget their troubles, heal. There's so many stories, and I say billions. That's a fact. I Love Lucy has played in 78 countries to an estimated 3 billion people. Since 1951, it has literally never gone off the air since its premiere, October 15th, 1951. All documented facts. And don't ask me the name of the historian, but it was a noted historian that I think it was Yale or Harvard. It was very big. And this historian estimated that Lucille Ball's, face, factoring in her other series other than I Love Lucy, because people can say, well, what about Desi Arnaz and Bill Frawley and Vivian Vance? But he estimated that Lucille Ball's face has been viewed by more human beings than any in the history of humanity. Now, that's quite something. Lucy came here with a purpose. And what's interesting, we talk about destiny, what we're born to do. I've always found it intriguing that Lucille Ball was born in 1911. Television did not exist. Radio did not exist. These were just things in people's imaginations. But yet, the woman was clearly born to do what she did. Clearly. There's not even a question in my mind. She had a little success in movies. She became sort of a mid-range star in the films. But it was I Love Lucy. That's where she became a superstar. And I mean a superstar, because in 1951, the movie industry was in a bad state. Television was just bulldozing it, taking over. In fact, television was seen as the enemy of the movie studios. And there was supposedly an unofficial blacklist of film stars that went over to television. If they went to television, they were not going to work in the movies anymore. And Lucy knew this, and she was very, very fearful of doing television. The only reason she wanted to do the show was to save her marriage to Desi. Now, that's known. And it was because she was working, in the film studios here in Hollywood. Desi, with his band, was on the road all the time. And as Lucy loved to joke on talk shows, she'd say, well, you can't have children over the telephone. Trust me, it doesn't work. And so she was yearning for anything to keep Desi homebound, to keep him in Hollywood where they could be together. And she thought, if we could just find a way we could work together. At one point, Lucy was even willing to give up her show business career, just be a housewife and mother. She wanted to have children. She wanted a stable home life. And at the time, she was doing a radio show called My Favorite Husband, which premiered in 1948. And by the way, all those shows are on the internet. If you ever want to listen to it, it had Bob Carroll Jr., Madeline Pugh, and Jess Oppenheimer, who were the writers for, they later on were the writers for I Love Lucy. Jess Oppenheimer was the producer and head writer on the radio show, and later became the producer and head writer of I Love Lucy. So you watch those radio shows. I mean, listen to those radio shows, not watch. The similarities are there. In fact, many of the scripts got recycled for I Love Lucy. So you'll also hear a lot of familiar plot lines and a lot of familiar lines. But the first season of I Love Lucy, they did an incredible 35 episodes. Now that's phenomenal, because in latter years, a typical TV season lasted about 24 episodes, and then it got reduced down to about 18 to 20. And now, like with Netflix series and things like that, you're doing good if you get 8 to 10 episodes. So imagine 35 original episodes, almost back to back. 35 episodes. And they even saved some episodes to use for the second season. So they'd actually shot closer to 39 or 40 episodes, almost back to back. But they were able to do that, I think, because they had all of those scripts from the radio show. And so they just did a little reworking and tweaking and twerking, whatever, and made them work for television. Lucy even said, these radio scripts are perfect. As she said to Bob and Madeline and Jess, when I did the radio show, I always thought you wrote visually. And sure enough, she was right. Lucy knew. But the great thing about the radio show is Lucy got to work in front of a studio audience. Truly, I know she had done the radio shows before in front of audience, but this was like a weekly show where she just got to come into her own. And the writers started to develop a synergy with her. And that's how the Lucy character got created on that radio show in front of a studio audience each week. In fact, Jess encouraged Lucy to actually put on costumes and act things out with props in front of the audience. And part of that was that's what the Jack Benny show did. And at the time, Jack Benny's radio show was #1 on the air. And it was also done at the CBS studios in Hollywood, where Lucy was doing her show. And one day, Jess Oppenheimer came in with a couple of tickets to Jack Benny and said, "Here, I'm sending you to school." And she was like, "Huh? Sending you to school? Go watch this." And she came back so excited. She said, "Oh my God, I see what you mean. Oh, yes. I want to incorporate this into my show." So it began there with that. And I'm not looking at the comments here. I need to see some of these. Yeah, it used to be that she had the most familiar face in the world. Well, I think she still does. She still does, because I Love Lucy still plays around the world. It plays here every day. There are markets all over the country. There are streaming channels that show it, cable. Yeah. I think Lucy still has the title. I wonder how she would have fared if there'd only been silent movies and nothing more. I think she would have done incredibly well. And the reason for that is Lucy's first education in comedy were silent movies. Her grandfather used to take young Lucy to the movies every Saturday. And Lucy said herself, she mentioned this in her autobiography, she fell in love with Buster Keaton and Charlie Chaplin and Harold Lloyd, and I've always suspected Harry Langdon also. He's kind of forgotten about of the four, but Harry Langdon was like this man boy character. He was a grown man, but acted like an innocent little boy, like a wide-eyed innocent little boy. And I always thought Lucy Ricardo was basically a girl woman, a grown woman, but like that little wide-eyed girl always getting into mischief. And I've always theorized Harry Langdon was one who influenced her. But no, Lucy loved silent comedy. And if you watch I Love Lucy, watch how visual she is. I think she would have done very well in silent movies, but thank goodness there was sound because then we got the full dimensions of the wonderful Lucille Ball. What was that? Gracie Allen once said she loved television so much she hardly ever watched the watched the radio anymore. Yeah, that sounds like a Gracie comment. Oh, how I love Gracie. It's my great regret that Lucy and Burns and Allen never worked together. It was talked about, in the Hollywood episodes of I Love Lucy, there was a list of potential guest stars, and among those were Burns and Allen. And I thought, why did that not happen? And I don't know, this is just a little theory of mine. I've always wondered if Lucy thought Gracie might have upstaged her. I've always wondered about that because Gracie had a very unique approach to comedy, truly a one of a kind approach to comedy. Was Lucy did too in her own way, but Gracie's comedy. See, people think Gracie's character was stupid. No, it's just that she lived in like an alternate universe. The way she perceived life, the way she commented on things, that's where her humor came from, this alternate universe. And I think that just naturally made Gracie stand out. Lucy was very astute, very smart. She understood comedy well. And I think she might have thought that might have upstaged her. I don't know. I'd love to know the reason they didn't work together, because to me, that's one of the great lost opportunities. Like, I've always thought it was a shame Buster Keaton, Lucille Ball's dear, dear friend and mentor, Buster actually taught Lucy his comedy when they were both at MGM. He taught her his comedy. He loved her. Buster went on record. He was in an interview. He was asked, who's the greatest comedian alive? And he said, Lucille Ball, without question. Her timing is the best. That's coming from Buster Keaton. So I always thought, what a shame Buster never guessed it on I Love Lucy. They did work together. It's on YouTube. It was in 1965, I think, 65, 66. It was the death of Stan Laurel. So CBS did a television special honoring Stan Laurel, and Lucy and Buster Keaton did a silent routine. And what I believe you were asking about her doing silent comedy. If you want to see Lucy do silent comedy, watch that skit. Type in Buster Keaton, Lucille Ball. Maybe you have to put in Stan Laurel. I don't know. It's on YouTube. And it's like a full silent movie sketch. It was on videotape and on color and everything, but it was done like a silent movie. And it also has Harvey Korman in it, oddly enough. Let's see what. Don't forget, Lucy had been a contract movie player, which meant that she had to constantly be working to stay afloat before she was anything close to famous. Oh, I'm very aware of that. Very aware of that. Yeah. But as a contract player, she did have a regular salary. I've like my late friend Evelyn Keyes used to tell me about what a wonderful thing the contract system was. She was part of that in the 30s and 40s. But one thing Evelyn Keyes told me, she said the studios expected you to work for your money. She said you basically worked at least 6 days a week. If you weren't making a movie, then you were being sent out to do publicity, you were being sent out to do interviews, or you were in the photo studio posing for still photos. You were always doing something. But she said you were taken care of. That's the thing. And Lucy even said that herself. She talked about that later in life, about how younger actors don't have that safety net and that protection anymore. But yeah, it was a fearful thing for Lucy because, see, Lucy was practical. She came from a humble background. And I think that, and also she, the story, I think I've told it on here, the time the family got sued and they lost their home and every belonging they had and got split up. So I think it was always at the back of Lucy's mind, oh my God, if I'm not working anymore, what's going to happen? And of course, Desi lost everything in the 1933 Cuban, the revolution, and his family had to flee. And they had been wealthy. They had mansions and yachts and horses, and they had to flee to Miami. And Desi, in his autobiography, tells the story of how he and his father had to live in a rat-infested warehouse, and he had to work. One of his jobs was cleaning bird cages for 15 cents an hour at a pet store. So they they knew what it was to lose your income and not work. And so it was a fearful gamble for Lucy. It was a fearful thing, to if the show had not succeeded. And you got to remember, they didn't know I Love Lucy was going to be this institution playing 73 years later and being called the greatest show of all time. They just wanted to work. They just wanted to do something together so they could stay home and start a family. And I've told the story on here how humble it was. They had to find a soundstage because this had never been done before, filming in front of an audience. There'd been video cameras, things like that in other shows, but to film, with studio lights and a polished production, that was what was innovative about I Love Lucy. It wasn't the fact they were filming in front of an audience. That had been done before. So no, I Love Lucy did not invent it, but I Love Lucy was the first to really perfect and polish it, with fine production values. That's why the films look so great to this day. But they had to find a soundstage. They had to actually cut a hole out of the back of the soundstage so they could make a studio audience entrance. And they had to find a way to fit bleachers in there and have the cameras and have the sets. And I'm going to come to a story because I was on that soundstage once, and I can tell you it was tiny. I was shocked how tiny that soundstage was. And on Romaine Street in Hollywood, it's the 6600 block of Romaine Street in Hollywood. The studio is still there. If you've ever seen the Robert Altman film, The Player with Tim Robbins, that was the studio they used for the fictitious movie studio. They went all around there. And on Romaine Street, there is a crack outline in the wall. They've sealed the wall up, the old studio audience entrance, but you can still see the crack outline. In fact, I've made some videos of it that are on my channel, Chuck's Captivating Chronicles. It's on there. I've been there. In fact, when my dear friend Bart Andrews passed away and he was cremated, my sister said, my sister, Bart's sister, Kathy, forgive me, a little slip there. I was talking about my sister earlier. She asked me, what were some places in town that he loved that we could distribute his ashes? And I said, oh, you have to put his ashes in front of the I Love Lucy studio audience entrance, at least some of his ashes, because I Love Lucy was such a part of his life and his career and how he wrote about it and how he loved it so much. And thankfully she agreed. So we did. And it was a day where it was pouring rain very hard. And I was actually glad about that, because when we sprinkled his ashes on the grass there, the rain soaked it all into the ground, his ashes into the ground. So he truly is there and part of that. And there was an I Love Lucy movie made in 1952. And basically what it was 3 episodes stitched together, and they filmed some bridges to put in between. And the movie was never released. It's now on DVD now. You want to see it, but they filmed a whole thing in the beginning where Desi's coming out doing the audience warm up with the microphone in his hand. He's introducing everybody as they come out and introduces Lucy, and the audience goes crazy. But they show that studio audience entrance and everybody filing in. And one of the actors they used for that was Anne Duran, who played James Dean's mother in Rebel Without a Cause. And I should look at my comments here. Let's see. Oddly enough, it had, let's see. Yeah, the Stan Laurel death episode. And let's see, it went on. Oh, yes, that's true about the bathroom. That is true. Because they were making it up as they went along. I mean, this was like a seedy old soundstage in a very rundown studio, but it was all they could afford and all they could get, and where they could get the zoning permits they needed and the permission to cut the hole in the back and everything. Because this also meant, because I think a studio audience was between 350, 400 people. So that was a lot of cars that had to be parked on the side streets and everything. And Desi, I'm just remembering this story, it was in his autobiography, to get the permit, He had to go door to door, all the houses around there, and tell them, this is what we're doing. Do you object to people being here, cars on the street on so and so night each week? And he got enough signatures on a, I guess, I don't know if petition is the right word for it, but he got enough signatures that he was able to get the permit. This is how hands-on Lucy and Desi were. Literally, Lucy had a broom. She was sweeping the soundstage herself. They were cleaning it themselves. The story, very famous, the day Vivian Vance, she met Vivian for the first time at a table read. That's when she and Lucy met for the first time. And according to Vivian Vance, Lucy said, here's a can of Bonami. Go scrub the John. So Vivian Vance was scrubbing the toilets and Lucy was sweeping the floor. Desi had to go out knocking on doors just to get permission from the neighborhood. It was almost like Mickey and Judy putting on a show in the barn. But yeah, to get back to what you were saying, Ward, that is true. They were about to start the show, start filming, and there was some inspector, like fire inspector, health inspector, or something. You can't go on. You only have one public toilet. You must have one for the men and one for the women. Otherwise, we've got to close this down. And that's when Lucy said, what about the bathroom in my dressing room? Tell the ladies to be my guest. So that's the story there. Yeah. Let me see. When it was the music and orchestra in the show at its production, it was a little bit of both, because there was definitely scoring done afterwards, but the orchestra was there. They were there. Like certainly all the nightclub sequences, that was real. That was really the orchestra. And I think there were times where the orchestra was playing in the backgrounds during some of the interludes of the show, which, at the time they were just making it up as they went along. And they probably figured, well, it was easier and cheaper to do it that way. And one of the big reasons the orchestra was on the show and why Desi's character was a band leader, this is how loyal Lucy and Desi were and how they cared about the people who worked for them. All these people in Desi's band, Desi could not bear the thought of them being let go and not having work, because he was going to go off and do this TV show. So they wrote his orchestra into the show. And that's the reason for it. Desi wanting to take care of everyone. But as we know, it was just marvelous. It was marvelous. All those nightclub sequences, all those musicals numbers. I know some people don't like them and go, oh, let's just have the comedy. I think there was even a line on the Golden Girls once, Sophia just, the stroke that affected that part of her brain that censored what she said. And I forget what the joke was, but it was something to the effect. Her punchline was, oh yeah, and I watch I Love Lucy to listen to Desi Arnaz sing. But I like the numbers. I do. And I mean, it gave wonderful opportunities to give Lucy some great comic moments. And, Lucy came from a musical background. People forget that. She did musicals at MGM. She was a wonderful dancer, as you see on the show, when she was allowed to dance. And she purposely sang badly because it was comical. But in real life, Lucy could carry a tune. Now, I know as she got older and her voice got deep, like Mame, people figured she should have been dubbed then. But yeah, no, Lucy in her day. I saw a clip of her from the movie Dance Girl Dance, where she sings The Jitterbug Bites. And that was not dubbed. That was Lucy's own voice. And she was good. No, she didn't have a beautiful Julie Andrews soprano or anything like that, but she definitely could carry a tune. And she could use her voice to great comic effect when she needed to. And she was singing. And she had great presence and great style. Let's see. Do you remember all these stories, or do you have them written down? No, in all immodesty, I remember all these stories. They're right up here. I have a weird memory. But a lot of this is because I also researched this. I wrote about it. We weren't able to publish the book, but I did a lot of work. But yeah, I remember all this. In fact, when I do my videos for my channel, when I get back into those Chuck's Captivating Chronicles, I'd say 98% of those are just me holding up a camera and talking. It's a weird thing. I have this memory. Bart Andrews and I used to joke about it because he was just like me. with all the show business trivia and history in his head. He said, Chuck, we have heads full of worthless information. Well, doing shows like this, making videos, gives me a chance to make it not quite so worthless. At least I hope not. Let's see. It was funny when Number Cars went to Hollywood. The New York-based band seemed to follow him. Well, yes. Like I said, they were taking care of their band. So, when you have writers making a show for you, you can tweak it to whatever you need it to be. Oh my God. And what some of those band members had to go through. There was one show where Ricky Ricardo was supposed to perform for, I think it was one of Lucy's club shows or something. And it was Ricky Ricardo and his all-girl band. And they ended up having to take several of his actual band members and put wigs and dresses on them. And I read they were not happy about that at all. And you watch the show though, when they're walking out, and of course it's being done for comedy, but those looks of disgust on their faces were quite real. Was there tension between Lucy and B. Arthur? Well, I've heard different accounts there. They certainly worked together enough times beyond name, but I know that B. Arthur, she in her later years, she expressed displeasure with the movie, working on the movie and the way the movie turned out. Got to remember, she did the Broadway show with Angela Lansbury. They both won Tony Awards. And B. Arthur was very upset that Angela Lansbury did not repeat her role in the movie. And she more or less said she thought Lucy was horribly miscast in the role. And, B had class. I mean, I know we think of her as being very outspoken and aggressive and all, but she had enough class. Because in the interview, she just said she clearly wanted to say more, but she just said, let's just put it this way. It was not a delicious experience. That's how she put it. So I think there was tension, but I don't know that it was that serious, because I know in subsequent years they worked together other times. And there was even talk of Lucy guesting on the Golden Girls. And I wish that had happened. In fact, I'm told, I was told this, or I read this somewhere. There was an episode, I believe it was Polly Holiday. I forget whose sister she was supposed to be. I don't know if it was Rose, but she was blind. And they wanted Lucy to play a blind woman. And now keep in mind, Lucy, underneath all that comedy, was a fabulous dramatic actress. And I thought, oh my God, that could have been brilliant. It could have been poignant. It could have been funny. I don't know what happened. It's like what I said. I don't know why Burns and Allen didn't do I Love Lucy. Why Buster Keaton didn't do it. Why didn't Lucy do that on Golden Girls? Maybe it scared her. Maybe she thought it was too much of a challenge or something. Or maybe Lucy thought the humor was too bawdy for her. It wasn't appropriate for her type of humor. Who knows? And there are different stories floating around. Her voice was deep from cigarette smoking. Well, also, Lucy liked her scotch from time to time. That's rough on the vocal cords. And I heard no, she didn't have a drinking problem. I don't want to imply that. Please know that. That's not what I meant by that. Just that it was collective, but I think the cigarette smoking definitely did it. I think it was heredity. A lot of women do get deeper voices as they get older. And Lucie Arnaz was talking about it, about how her mother didn't take care of her voice. Like she would do comedy where she was doing a lot of screaming and yelling. And Lucie Arnaz also said when Lucille Ball was doing Wildcat on Broadway, 8 shows a week, this was after I Love Lucy, she was really, really taxing her voice. And she always wondered if that had a lot to do with why Lucy's voice got so deep. And I can tell you this, Lucy actually raised her voice when she was performing. Her real life voice was even deeper. And I know this because I told this on another show about my friend Jim Brochu. He had answering machine tapes that he had saved. I know that's controversial that he recorded conversations between them, and he used this in a book. but he played them for me, and I got to hear Lucy as she really was. And God bless her. I say nothing to put my beloved Lucy down. This is not, please know that. But her voice, if I had known better, I would have thought it was a man. It was so deep and so bass on there. So it was a combination of things. And I always thought it was sad because Lucy always had such an expressive voice. And as she got older and her voice got that deep, her voice lost its natural flexibility. I think that hampered her comedy in later years. So where's some other comments here? Oh yeah, the band was miserable about doing drag, but Bill Frawley, how he reacted. But oh my God, one of my favorite episodes ever is the one where Ricky's been fired from the Tropicana, and Lucy and Fred and Ethel are putting on all these different costumes and coming into the nightclub as different characters and pretending to be outraged that no, Ricky Ricardo, as Lucy, one of her characters, this flousy blonde. Well, I'm getting out of this crummy dump. But if you recall, Fred was in drag for the last sequence. Oh my God, that's funny. Oh, look, Hazel, Ricky Ricardo's not here anymore. That slays me every time I watch that. Every time. That's the beauty of I Love Lucy. And I bet you'll agree with me. There's got to be episodes I've seen 200-300 times, and they still make me laugh. Even though when you know everything is going to happen. And to me, that's the genius of the show, because comedy, a lot of it is reactionary. You know, when you're seeing it the second time and the surprise is gone, the humor is gone. But I swear, things like when they wallpaper the bedroom and Lucy can't find Ethel, and then, Ethel, where are you? And then the door opens and rips through the wallpaper. Here I am. It's always funny. You know it's coming, but it's funny. Same thing with the assembly line, the chocolate assembly line. I mean, come on, in anybody else's hands, lesser hands, that routine would have been silly and tired, and you probably couldn't watch it more than once or twice, as we all know. I think you'll agree with me, no matter how many times you watch it. If it's the 300th time, it remains hysterical. And I think it's because they were so in the truth of the moment. They were so invested in what they were doing. Because Lucy was asked about that once at a symposium on stage. I think it was at the Museum of Radio and Television in New York. And someone said, what is the secret of Lucy Ricardo, playing Lucy Ricardo? And she said, I always played her as a child believer, meaning a little child, like a little child playing make-believe, a little child in their imaginary world, playing house, whatever. She said, I was a child believer. Pure innocence. I believed everything. I did. And I thought, yeah, that's the secret of a great actor. They believe it, so they make you believe it. And when people say, well, the plots of that show were so silly and absurd and ridiculous, and I point out, yeah, but Lucy made you believe it, didn't she? It didn't seem absurd when Lucy was doing it, because she was such a great, great actress. And you watch her, and like you can't see it over here, but I have a 65-inch big screen TV, high definition, 4K. And even watching Lucy's face up close on a big screen, watching her body, watch her eyes, there is not one false moment. Literally every cell in her body believed what she was doing. That's what Jess Oppenheimer said about her. He said she was one of the most wondrous performers he had ever worked with in his life. He said the woman, just every cell in her body believes what she's doing, and it's magic. And he used to say, we write a script for her, and she doesn't just give us 100%, she gives us 110% back. She makes us look much better than we actually are, what she does with our material. But of course, Lucy always insisted that she said, I am dead without my writers. I have some copies of I Love Lucy shooting scripts, and literally every single bit of business was written into the script. like the Vitamin episode, all the stuff. It vividly describes the transitions as she gets progressively drunker and drunker. But that's not to diminish what Lucy did with that material. My God, I think that's one of the greatest performances any actor has ever put on film, and I mean that. You know, a lot of motion picture acting is done in short takes. I Love Lucy, of course, was filmed 3 cameras running continuously. That whole Vitamin with all of those transitions was one take, one continuous take with no flubs. That was genius. Now, there was almost a flub, almost, but even Lucy managed to make that work and incorporate it into the scene. You probably recall in the front, you know, when she's there at her little booth holding up her bottle, there's a man with a crew cut. You only see the back of his head, man, glasses, and he's sitting in a director's chair with the script. Well, that was the real life script clerk, Maury Thompson, who later got promoted. And by the time of the years of the Lucy show, here's Lucy. He was directing episodes, but he was the script clerk at the time. And Lucy was so nervous about forgetting dialogue because that was complicated dialogue. And plus, she had to, in her head, get progressively more intoxicated. You know, she was a method actor, you know, so she had to actually believe she was getting inebriated to make it real. And so she was scared to death of tripping up on a line. So she said, okay, Maury, we're putting you in makeup and we're going to put you in the scene. And if I get in trouble, you're going to be there with the script and you're just going to treat it like this is the way it is, the script clerk for the commercial giving a line. Because there's one part in the Lucy, in the scene, sorry to say in the Lucy, in the scene where Lucy does, you can watch it, she momentarily freezes up. And she goes, I don't know where to start unless I start again at the beginning. And the director, the actor playing the director says, okay, start again at the beginning. That was for real. She really did freeze. And she said, I don't know where to start unless I start again at the beginning. But she made it seamlessly work in the scene. Her genius. I had a friend from Sydney, Australia, who came to visit. And he stayed with me a couple of nights. He had never seen an episode of I Love Lucy. And he wanted to come to Los Angeles to be an actor. He had studied acting extensively. And I said, you've got to watch this. And I put on Vitamin I Love Lucy. And it's always fun to watch someone who's never seen the episode. And I Love Lucy virgin. And I'm showing him the best episode ever. And he sat there just transfixed because he was watching it as a trained actor. He said, you mean she did all this in one take? How did she do this? This is incredible. What actor can do this in one take? And I said, oh, she did. Trust me, she did. And, you know, let's see, one other little thing I'll say about that. Apple pectin was what they used in the Vitamin bottle because they needed something thick and gooey. But at the same time, that it had to be something reasonably palatable to Lucy so she wouldn't completely gag. But, you know, the famous first part of that where she keeps taking a spoon, you know, and shaking and reacting. And it's so real. Well, I found out why it was so real because I tried apple pectin once. And the first time you taste it, it makes you shake. It's bitter. Oh, I see why she reacted the way she did. But here's the strange thing about taking spoonfuls of apple pectin. Each time you taste it, it somehow starts to taste better. Now, I don't know what that is because, you know, Lucy, if you notice how she kept tasting it and finally she got used to it and she went on. And one point she has that line, you know, this stuff tastes pretty good once you get used to it. And it's true. Apple pectin, once you get used to it, it does start to taste pretty good, but it's really bitter in the beginning. So it's interesting. I need to check my comments here. Betty, why you say when she called Lucy's home, Lucy would answer and Betty thought it was Gary. Betty, you idiot. Gary's voice is higher. I'm reminded of another story. Somebody was calling the house for Lucille Arnaz, and and the person was a little tactless and said, "Is this young Lucy?" And Lucille Ball, without missing a beat, said, "No, this is old Lucy." And there's another story I heard about where she had called somebody's home on the answering machine. She was calling from Palm Springs. They were going through a heat wave, and she said, "Oh, it's hotter than hell here. I can't wait till you come down here to join me." Well, anyway, someone got a hold of that tape and played a practical joke on someone. This was after Lucy had died, and played the tape on the phone. "It's hotter than hell where I am right now. I can't wait for you to join me." So I tell that because I think Lucy herself would have found that story very funny. Uh, uh, yeah, you're right, Ward. She would tell, no matter how outrageous the situation, you got to believe it. That's what my acting teacher, Dee Wallace, used to tell us. Dee Wallace, who played the mother in E.T., she used to tell us, when you're playing comedy, you play it exactly the same as you would drama. Exactly. You're going to play it with the same conviction. You're going to play it with the same truth, the same belief. The only difference is you're going to incorporate higher stakes and, of course, comedic timing. Hence, that's why most actors will say this. Laurence Olivier said this. Comedy is much harder to do than straight drama. And I always get frustrated with people when people put comedy down, comedic acting. I actually got into an argument with someone on Facebook, and I know better than to do this, but it was about, it was the year Viola Davis won her Best Actress Emmy. And it was said at the time she was the first African-American actress to win a lead actress Emmy. And I pointed out, but Isabel Sanford won a lead actress Emmy back in 1980 for The Jeffersons. And the person shot back, "Oh, that doesn't count because that's comedy. Viola Davis did drama." And so I tried my best to correct this person and say, "No, you don't get it. Comedy takes even more skill than drama." And I went on to say, why would you want to diminish the great achievement Isabel Sanford made? Why would you even want to do that? Anyway, that was the argument there. And then, oh, no, wait, I did point out something. Isabel won that Emmy for a semi-dramatic episode. It was the one where Louise was going back to her childhood home before it was going to be torn down. And she said that she used to imagine the glass doorknobs were big diamonds. And there's a very poignant moment then where she unscrews the doorknob and puts it in her purse and takes it with her. So anyway, she got her Emmy for that. I should check my comments here. Yeah, Lucy said that. She wasn't funny. She said, "What I am is brave." Well, I know she said that, but Lucy, you were funny. Own it. You were funny. You were very funny. But you know where she got part of that from? It's in her autobiography. You know how we talk about how we are basically programmed by the time we're 5, 6, 7 years old, all these experiences. And she wrote it in her autobiography. Her late father, who died when she was about 3 3/4 years old, she adored her father. And he used to toss her up very high in the air and catch her, and then throw her up high and catch her. And Lucy said she was never, ever afraid because she knew her daddy would always catch her. And so I think that instilled a sense of bravery in her that always stayed with her. And I think that was also one of the reasons why I know she so wanted Desi beside her on the show, literally at her side, because Desi made Lucy feel safe. He made her feel secure. He gave Lucy what she needed to have the courage to do these big, big over-the-top moments that were very risky, that could have fallen flat, or she even could have been injured, or what. I mean, literally falling flat. But she always felt safe when she had her Desi with her. And she said that. And I think that's one of the reasons when she did Here's Lucy many years later, she so wanted her 2 teenage children acting with her, because it was an extension of having her family, her loved ones with her while she did her comedy. That's where I think that comes from. That's my own theory. I would say, where you say it needs to be said that it was no mean feat for Lucy Ricardo to get drunk, without seeming to be a lush or a tramp. Yeah, well, same thing has been said, that Lucy, for all of her outrageousness, all the pies in the face and wallows in the grape vats and the mud and everything, she never lost her femininity. And you never, ever forgot for one moment that this was a lady. A lady. And I've always felt that's what made the comedy work, because it was just, because comedy is about extremes and opposites. And so you've got this lady, beautifully coiffed, made up, beautifully dressed, very much a lady in her behavior, getting so crazy and outrageous and so scheming and over the top. It worked beautifully. And she really set a standard for other female comedians. I think there's no question. I've always felt Carole Lombard did it before Lucy. Lucy took the torch, and in turn, that torch went on to women like Mary Tyler Moore and Carol Burnett, Tina Fey. But yeah, when she did that drunken scene, it worked. You never forgot that was a lady. And also it worked, and this was pointed out by the writers, they never, ever had Lucy get intentionally drunk. If it happened, it was accidental. She was a victim of it. It was perfectly innocent. Again, it was the little wide-eyed girl. I'm doing a TV commercial and I'm eager to please and I'm eager to do this right. And she's trying so hard to learn to like the Vitamina Vegemin and please the director. And poor thing, she gets drunk because it's got 23% alcohol. 23%. That's another story I can tell quickly. I was at a tribute to Lucille Ball in 1991. It was held at the Television Academy, I believe Lancashire Boulevard in the Valley. Was it in Encino? I can't remember now where the Television Academy used to be at the time, but it was a wonderful tribute. Milton Berle was there, Edie Adams, Lois Jensen, the costume designer, Bob and Madeline, the writers, Bill Asher, the director. It was just a magical evening. And yeah, they talked about this, but Jerry Hausner was still alive. He was, I think, 83 at the time. And I was there with Bart Andrews, so I got to sit in the VIP section in the front rows. I got to sit with Jerry Hausner. Oh, he was just sweet, man. Tiny little man. He was so short. I don't know if he was more than 5'2", 5'3", just an itty bitty little man. So sweet. And it was almost strange seeing him as an elderly man, but I got to sit with him and talk with him for a bit. And he said, because he was on, he played Joe, the stage manager. Usually he was Jerry the agent, but he was Joe, the stage manager. And there's that scene where he has to walk right up to her and get right up nose to nose, right in her face. And they stand there for a moment because she is so inebriated. And Jerry said it was like lightning coming off of her. There was so much energy coming off of Lucy that is, oh my God. And he said he was just awestruck. Literally, to walk up to her, right up to her face, right up to her eyes when she's in the middle of that iconic scene. It was in the script. He had to do it. And he said that he'll never forget that energy coming off of her. So there's the story there. And I better get back to comments here. In the kitchen with Jeannie. Hi there. Warden, let's see, kitchen. Sorry, I'm just going through my comments here. I do apologize, as I've said before. Reading comments and doing the show, it's a bit like patting my head, rubbing my stomach, and drinking a glass of water. I need to get coordinated. I almost wish it could be like a teleprompter where I could just look ahead and just read the comments as they're in front of me, but I got to glance over from time to time. So I hope you pardon me, and I hope I don't seem rude to anyone, because I never, ever wish to do that. Yes, Gail Gordon was also good security for Lucy. I don't know if you know this, but Gail Gordon has the distinction of being the only actor to ever appear on every single broadcast series Lucille Ball did. And I say every broadcast series, I'm counting radio. The first time they worked together was in 1938, which obviously was radio. And it was really the first time Lucy had ever worked in front of a studio audience. She was a regular. It was called The Wonder Show, but it was also slash the Jack Haley Show. Jack Haley, who played the Tin Man in The Wizard of Oz. In fact, he was shooting The Wizard of Oz during the day, and then at night would do this radio show once a week. So Lucy was working with him at the time. And Gail Gordon was one of the regulars on the show. And those shows, you can listen to them on the internet. The Wonder Show, Jack Haley. You can hear Lucy and Gail Gordon working together in 1938. And then in 1948, she, of course, did My Favorite Husband. And he was one of the regulars on there. The character he played was the predecessor to Fred Mertz. Only it was a different character. It was Lucy's husband's boss. And the great Bea Benaderet played his wife, since she was sort of the forerunner of Ethel Mertz. So much so that when it came time to do the television series, Lucy very much wanted Bea Benaderet and Gail Gordon to come aboard and play Fred and Ethel Mertz. But Bea Benaderet was committed to the Burns and Allen show, the television series, and Gail Gordon was committed, what was he committed to? I think it was, no, it wasn't Our Miss Brooks. He later did that, but there was something else. He had some sort of commitment. He could not do the show in 1951. And so hence, that's how Bill Frawley and Vivian Vance found their immortality and the roles they were clearly meant to play and were born to do. But Gail Gordon did guest on I Love Lucy as Mr. Littlefield, the owner of the Tropicana. And he later played a judge on one of the hour-long episodes. So he was on I Love Lucy. And then, of course, he joined the Lucy show in the second season as Mr. Mooney. Mr. Mooney. And then he was later Uncle Harry on Here's Lucy. And then in 1986, 48 years after they had first worked together, they did Lucille Ball's final series, Life with Lucy, which I sat in the audience for an episode of the filming. And I've told that story enough times, but I've seen the great Lucy and the great Gail Gordon work together. And Gail was 80 at the time, and I just couldn't believe the energy the man had. Oh my God. And, he ended up outliving Lucy by several years, which was a big surprise. But, Lucy adored Gail Gordon. I've seen interviews of them together. You just see how much respect and love they had. And Lucy, one of the things Lucy liked about her character, she wanted, because it was like a little girl, like a girl woman character, she wanted to be disciplined and put in her place. She felt that was an important part of the character. Hence, Desi as Ricky played that role. Well, later, that was the basis behind Mr. Mooney and Uncle Harry. The firm disciplinarian. Like in the beginning of the show, before he was her boss, she was doing his secretary. He was the banker in charge of her trust fund left to her by her husband. And of course, Lucy being Lucy, she was always scheming to get more money, to buy a coat or a hat or whatever. And he was having to tightly control her purse strings, but they're disciplining her. And it worked. I remember when I was a little boy and I'd watch those shows. I used to not like him. I thought, you're mean to Lucy. I don't like you. You're mean to Lucy. But I watch it now. And I watch that man's brilliant comedic timing. And the way he played off of her. And I can really appreciate what he did now. And I think he was a genius. I think he could have very well have had his own show. But I think he was smart enough to stay with Lucy. He knew that's where he shined brightest. And he basically was the co-star on the show. He was even billed second right after her. Let's see what else is on here. Oh my God, I've been talking about more than an hour. I have fun with you guys. I love doing this. And I've learned to just come on here with a very loose format and let all of you guide me, with your questions, your comments, and We go all over the place, don't we? Oh, I didn't know that Mr. Gordon had to overcome having no upper palate. Now that was genial. I'm captivated. My kind of stuff. An easy subscribe. Well, thank you for saying that. Thank you for your kind words for me. Huge fan of Hollywood stories. Well, that's my passion. If you look on my channel, you'll see a lot of videos I've made in the last year to old Hollywood stories. And, as I've mentioned, I've had to work on a lot of alternate projects and things and work. So I haven't been able to do those lately, but I will. But like I Love Lucy, it's reruns. It's all on there. Thank goodness YouTube archives everything. I mean, everything. Like a few things I just as soon be forgotten about, like some of my earlier shows. But it's just out there. It's human. It's me. Let's see. Where's some other comments here? B. Benaderet was a genius. Yes, she was. Everything from Blanche Morton to Betty Rubble, and then Kate Bradley. And, in the story there, about Kate Bradley, it was Paul Henning, who was, of course, the head writer for Burns and Allen. And he recognized how really great she was. And of course, when he did the Beverly Hillbillies, he had B on there the first year as Cousin Pearl. Remember Cousin Pearl, who yodeled? Badly yodeled. I remember there was even a joke once where she had Mr. Drysdale on the phone, yodelay-hoo, yodelay-hoo, and it was so bad he had to put the phone in the drawer and close it, and the desk was shaking because of the phone and the yodeling. Well, anyway, Paul Henning approached B and said, "You've been a supporting player your whole career. I'm going to see to it now that you're going to be a star." And he created Petticoat Junction with the intention of it being a starring role, finally, for B. Benaderet. It was all tailored for her. In fact, I was in his home once. God, all these stories, but I was in Paul Henning's home once. This was back, I think, around 1993. And I met, of course, his lovely wife, Ruth Henning. I just adored them both. And Paul had the best memorabilia in his home, like Petticoat Junction. I know, of course, they used a real train. Yes, I am aware of that. But they also had a model train they used for certain shots. He had the model train of the Cannonball train. And he had track laid all throughout his house, like going through the living room and other rooms, track running along the walls with that train. And he had wonderful other stuff. And it sounds like something out of a scripted movie, but it's absolutely true. When I went into the house to meet Paul, he was in his den, sitting in front of a television watching Beverly Hillbillies. It was like a scripted moment in a movie. And after he introduced myself, he was kind of still watching the show. And I remember he said to me, "Now, Buddy Ebsen had a cold when we were filming this episode. Listen to his voice." And I thought, yeah. You could hear the nasal congestion in his voice. I thought that was quite a little memory there. But yeah, B. Benaderet was fabulous. It's Kate Bradley. And Ruth said to me that the premise of the show was based on, they were both from Missouri. And she said there was a little town there with a little hotel. It was a train stop. And there was a little tiny hotel there where people would stay for the night before getting back on the train. And that was the main purpose of the hotel. And Paul Henning thought, hey, I'm going to use that for my show for B. Benaderet. And, and B, you watch that show, she was very much the glue that held it together. I used to like the show when I was a kid. I've rarely watched it, but there are some episodes on Amazon Prime, and I checked it out. And I thought, the thing about Petticoat Junction, it wasn't one of those ha-ha laugh-out shows. It was more like warm, folksy, chuckle kind of humor. And she had such warmth and presence. She was the matriarch of the show. She was the mother of the three daughters and the ones who bathed in the town water supply. I know that's the joke. Yes, I know it wasn't literally the town water supply. It was a water tank for the train for cooling. But the big joke is the Bradley sisters were bathing in the town water supply. So That's why I bring that up. Let me see here. Lucy rubbed real snow in George Gordon's face. That was Lucy. They were very much sticklers on that show about using real props wherever possible. Hence the 13-foot loaf of bread. I'm sure you know that story about how the prop department wanted to make a loaf of bread out of paper mache, and Lucy and Desi said, no, it's got to be real. It's got to be real bread. So they couldn't find a bakery willing to do it, because most of the bakeries would say, well, first of all, we don't have pans that big, and secondly, the weight of that bread would cause our ovens to implode. Our ovens wouldn't support the weight of that bread. But Desi finally found a bakery in San Francisco that could do it. And they had 2 loaves of bread made, 13-foot loaves of bread, because you've got to always have a standby. And that's what they used on the show. And then after the show was over, as you recall, Ethel was making butter, home churned butter. All that butter now only cost $23.95. And I thought, the genius of that joke, that was in 1952. Here it is in 2024. That joke still works, though less and less. And a day is going to come where probably that is going to be the cost of that amount of butter, and that joke's not going to work anymore, but it still works. But anyway, they had jam, and they had butter, and they had these huge slices of bread, and they invited the studio audience to come down after the show to take home a big slice of bread with the butter and jam or whatever they wanted on it. So that comes up, with hence the real snow there. They wanted everything real on that show. In fact, they were even insistent that all the appliances work, that the telephones work on the show, and some of the prop department people would say, but this isn't necessary. You don't have to have this. They said, yes, we do. We want it real. And there was the episode with Tallulah Bankhead, where she's talking on the phone with Lucy. And I read that it was during rehearsal. Tallulah Bankhead said, in my whole career, I have never acted where we've had an actual phone that works, where I can actually hear Lucy talking on the other end of the phone. Usually actors have to pretend that sort of thing. So yeah, that's all what contributed to the honesty of the show. And they knew that. I'm actually more sympathetic to Mr. Mooney, having had to work with folks who needed discipline, but not as funny as Lucy. And I think that's why he stayed with her all those years. Why he didn't go off and do his own show. He knew what he had, and she knew what she had in him. And they had a very playful chemistry with each other. I've seen some outtakes where they actually got a little bawdy. Like, did I just hear them say that? There's one outtake where they're reminiscing or something, and Gail Gordon broke character and said, remember that time you had a pickaxe stuck up your ass? And Lucy just lost it. That's almost as funny. There's another famous outtake that gets played to death on social media and YouTube. It's where Vivian Vance and Lucy are together, and they're in character, and they're talking about all their schemes, and Lucy saying, well, I always did get in a lot of little schemes, but there was never any big deal or something. And Vivian Vance in character says, oh, really? My ass. And Lucy lost it. Yeah, that's right. Cousin Pearl was Jethro's mom. Always liked it when Jethro played Jethrine, his sister. And you know what? Max Baer committed to it. He went for it. I mean, I know they dubbed a woman's voice in and everything, but he played it straight. Kind of an ironic word to use, but he played it straight. He played it like a woman, and that's what made it so funny, so very funny. He and Irene Ryan, I understand, just adored each other. Her birthday, I don't think, was that long ago, the anniversary of her birth. And while we're talking about Irene Ryan, some of you may know, she did not have children. She was quite wealthy from her years on Beverly Hillbillies, and she left all of her estate to establish a scholarship for aspiring actors. And here it is, like more than 50 years later, there's still the Irene Ryan Scholarship, helping young actors What a legacy that is. Um, yeah, Buster Keaton would have loved Paul Hanning's house because that's right. He loved model trains too. He loved gadgets. Uh, nah, I don't feel old about In the Kitchen with Jeannie. Don't feel old about loving shows like Petticoat Junction. You know, it just shows you have good taste. You know, and there are a lot of kids who discover these things, like I said, on Amazon Prime, things like that. They're always finding new audiences. Carol Burnett was talking about how she gets fan mail now from children and teenagers who have discovered her skits on YouTube. So it lives on. Let's see other comments here. I bet hearing Lucy on the phone shook Tallulah up. Well, I've told the story on here about how Tallulah shook Lucy up. That was not a happy week of filming. Tallulah was quite a handful, quite inebriated. But boy, you watch that episode. You know, people put down the hour-long episodes. I think that hour-long episode with Tallulah Bankhead is right up there. I put that in the top 5. I think that's one of the greatest I Love Lucy's ever done. It is wickedly funny. I mean, the dialogue when she and Tallulah get into a cat fight in the kitchen, and Tallulah says, "I'm going to pull that pink hair out by its black roots." What a great line. Yeah, Gail Gordon did have funny working with Lucy, even if Mr. Mooney didn't. You know, one of the earliest shows with Gail Gordon is Mr. Mooney. I think this was the second season of the show. It was, I don't know, I think this was the very first, but it was one of the very first episodes he ever did. It was where he and Lucy accidentally get locked in the vault for the weekend, the bank vault, and they finally get rescued. And Mr. Mooney is just about to walk out, and Lucy slams the door shut and locks him back in there. But they have this moment where they are free. They get out of the vault for a moment or something. God, I got to watch that episode again. But Gail Gordon should have won an Emmy. The way he reacts. I mean, you believe this is a man who has been locked in a bank vault with a crazy redhead for 2 whole days. I mean, he was just like insane when he came out of the vault. If you ever get the chance to see that show, it is impeccable comedic acting. Yeah, Ward does line. Sensible, my ass. Yeah, hear Vivian Vance saying that. Oh, so Linda Henning did the voice for Jethro. That doesn't surprise me because Linda Henning, of course, was obviously the name Henning was their daughter. In fact, when I was talking with Ruth, you know, because they had pictures of Linda there, and of course they were very proud of her, and Ruth told me that the role Anne Margaret played in Bye Bye Birdie, Linda had auditioned for that, and she was in the final running, and they said she was so heartbroken when she didn't get the movie role. And it was a little bit of a consolation that they wrote the role of Betty Jo for her into Petticoat Junction, let her do the show. And she was very good on that show. In fact, it was weird. The other 2 actresses, there were actually several actresses who played the other sisters. A lot of interchanging, but Linda Henning stayed with the show the entire run. That was one of the few consistencies. And of course, you know, the actor played Uncle Joe. Edgar Buchanan, marvelous character actor. He was with the show the entire run. But Bea Benaderet, it's so sad. She had to leave the show because of her. I think she had, was it lung cancer, throat cancer? I think it was lung cancer she had. And she worked as long as she could, and she tried to hide her illness, and they tried to shoot around her, and as she was getting thinner and frailer, they tried every trick, makeup trick and wardrobe, to make her look healthier. But I remember it was one of the actresses who played the daughter. I think it was the actress who played Bobby Jo, Laurie Saunders, that was her name. And she said Bea's hand was trembling so badly. And they had a scene together where they were sitting at a little table. So Laurie just put her hand on Bea's hand and held it down. And they just played the scene that way, like she was just holding her mother's hand. And she said that was the last episode Bea Benaderet ever got to do. And she died a few weeks later. Poor thing, but that's the story there. Let's see. Yes, for a 2-part episode, Lucy and meeting Mr. Mooney in the vault. That was it. I've got to watch that again. I admit I haven't seen that in a while. Let's see, in the kitchen with Jeannie. I'm working on a skit to do on YouTube tomorrow for Halloween comedy. Now I'm nervous. It's not easy to pull off comedy. You got to stay in character. Made hubby agree to be in it with me. You'll be fine. Don't worry about it. Just be natural. Be yourself. As Dee Wallace, I had an excellent acting teacher. I think, and she always said, just play comedy. Same truth, same conviction as you would drama. Just play it straight. Really believe what you're doing, but just be mindful. You raise your stakes. And just be mindful of your rhythms, comedy rhythms. And a lot of that is actually fun when you've got a scene partner to just bounce off of each other and go back and forth. I think you'll surprise yourself. You'll do very well. Very, very well. I wish you a lot of luck there. Yeah, wow. 5 performers played Betty Jo's 2 sisters. Yeah, quite something. Yeah, I forget what all the stories were, why that was. Yes, I knew that about Edgar Buchanan having been a dentist. And yeah, he was a great character actor. That Uncle Joe character was kind of an old curmudgeon and stuff. But yeah, you can see the timing there. In fact, I remember reading an interview, I think it was with Linda Henning, and she said it was just a masterclass in rehearsals to watch B and Edgar play off of each other because they were both such seasoned professionals. In fact, Edgar Buchanan was, you may know the movie Penny Serenade with Irene Dunn and Cary Grant, made around 1941. He played one of the featured roles in that. It's kind of strange to see him so much younger. Okay, well, bye for now. Let's see. In the kitchen with Jeannie, bye for now. I'm going to set our stage. Well, I wish you the very, very best of luck, and thank you so much for joining me. Yeah, she died from lung cancer and dubbed the last episode with a double from the back. I remember that as a kid. It was when Betty Jo had her baby. And of course, they wanted Kate to be there. The only way they could do that, the character of Kate, of course, was to have a double. And they just dubbed, the voice was dubbed in. That might have been one of the last things B ever did, dubbing that. Assuming it was her, they might have even had someone who sounded like her. Even that's been done. Wow, I could go off on the story of Jean Harlow when she died in the middle of Saratoga, the movie Saratoga with Clark Gable, and they had to employ a lot of tricks like that to finish the film. Using her double, her stand-in, dubbing in her voice, having another actress do dubbing, having a stand-in player for some long shots, back shots. They had to recycle some unused scenes with Jean, just any trick they could just to make it look believable that she hadn't died halfway through the film and she was still there. And I mean, that's a strange movie to watch, but that's another topic. I'm just seeing if there are any other comments here, because, oh my God, I don't know how I did this, but I've been talking for an hour and a half. But, I thank you all for being with me. And because I haven't been doing new videos for the last few weeks, this is basically my contribution to the channel. So I guess it's more appropriate that I do a longer show right now. And it's always fun to do this. And oh God, I didn't even get to talk about the Kamala Harris Portrait Award. You were asking about that. Let's just put it this way. I still cannot find anybody. I have made so many calls to the Democratic Party. I've called Sacramento, LA, Pasadena. I've had recommendations of where to go. I've sent emails, phone calls, texts. I know they're slammed right now, 3 weeks for the election, but I wanted to donate this for fundraising. I can't get anybody to hear me, to even take it. So we'll see what happens. It's I still have it here. I was going to show it. I'll show it next week. I'll talk about it. I don't want to wear out my welcome here, so I better go. But I do thank you. It means a lot to me when you all join me, and I'm very touched. I never take any of you for granted. It means a lot. Love you. Watch me tomorrow on the Oracle of Whimsy channel, where every Tuesday, 5 p.m. Pacific, 8 p.m. Eastern, just like this show, only on Mondays, I do Taco Tuesdays with Dr. Whimsy Anderson, who is a marvelous naturopathic doctor and a medical intuitive. She specializes in heart-centered remote viewing, tarot reading, and she makes a lot of predictions on the show, and sometimes she gets me to join in. I told you, Whimsy always was one to get me out of my comfort zones. I wouldn't even be doing this show if it weren't for her, because I started doing that show. So anyway, that's the other place I can be found. My friend Pam and I, we're talking about maybe doing a third show during the week, her and myself. It's still just in planning talk stages. I don't know where that's going to come, but maybe. And let me see some other comments here. Well, thank you. I do have the portrait here. Might as well just pull it out for anyone who's still watching. This is the portrait of Kamala Harris I did that I am trying to donate for a fundraising event, because I thought it'd be perfect for a silent auction. I'd be willing to get it framed. I even wrote in my emails I'd be willing to do 2 or 3 or 4 more original pieces if it would raise money for the campaign, but no one is returning my messages. So we shall see what's fated for this. But thank you for your words, Ward. And Paula, oh, thank you. Thank you for calling me a bright light. That means a lot. My stories. Thank you very, very much. So here it is, 6:30 my time here in Los Angeles. I'm going to say goodbye to you for now. Thank you. I send you my love, and I'll be here next week, I promise. Goodbye.